Hopefully, we won't have any interruptions from stupid toads or golems. Go away. I do what I want. You got fired. You're always mean. I'm sending in a professional to get rid of you. What was that? Oh my gosh! I'll be nice, I promise. Hi, Braden. Hi, Jackson. Hi, Lorenzo. You guys aren't suckers? Oh, you're being nice now. I promise I'll be nice. Why do you have this ridiculous voice? I don't know. This is what I really sound like. Does anybody want to hear a voice that sounds like that? I hope so, because it sounds exactly like my voice. Leave me alone! Never mind. This is getting dumb. Hey everybody, it is 21.2 today. We're going to talk about Dwight David Eisenhower. He was the former commander-in-chief of the Allied forces and was elected as president in 1953. His campaign slogan was "I like Ike," because Ike was his nickname. He ensured American economic prosperity and wanted to build up our defenses against communism. He strengthened the North American Treaty Organization and the Seattle Treaty Organization, and America blocked communism from its shores. We're in the middle of a long Cold War. Unfortunately, this is also part of the McCarthy era, in which spying seemed to increase by the communists in America, and America became very paranoid about it. Roosevelt's main advisor at the Yalta Conference at the end of World War II was found out. His name was Alger Hiss, and he was found out to be a communist, and he had lied in court and went to jail for perjury in 1950. A former spy named Whittaker Chambers testified against him. Also, by 1949, the Soviets had the atomic bomb because they had so many spies infiltrating America. Even in the Manhattan Project at Los Alamos, they had Soviets who were pressuring our scientists, including Robert Oppenheimer, Fermi, Teller, and all these other scientists, to give up secrets or suffer terrible consequences. And so by 1949, the Soviets had atomic bombs. Two of the major spies were found out. They were Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, and they were quickly executed in 1953. There was a senator named Joseph P. McCarthy. In 1950, he made the claim that Soviet spies had infiltrated the State Department in large number. By 1951 and all the way through 1954, he held investigations of everyone from teachers to popular writers to actors and anybody that had any kind of former dealings with the Communist Party. He had identified several spy rings by 1952 and was doing okay work, but by 1954, McCarthy's paranoia about communism had reached a zenith, and he began to investigate the American army. There was a lot of hearings that went on, court cases, and they were televised. And McCarthyism, or McCarthy's work against communism, had become a witch hunt, per se. I'll fire you too. Had become a witch hunt. He just wants to learn about history, I think. Had become a witch hunt, and which basically means they're hunting down people and accusing them of things that they didn't do. And it gained a very poor public image. McCarthy began to look like a bully. A lot of popular actors had been blacklisted because of their communist leanings. Um, Even though many of the claims were true, the bad public image led him, led the Senate and the country to kind of denounce McCarthy. Even though his paranoia had formed this blacklist, it was just to the point of being too much. It would be something interesting to look up on Wikipedia someday, look up McCarthyism. Um, but we won't get into it anymore today. American and Soviet relations were poor. We were holding sham conferences basically. In 1955, we held a summit where the new communist leader after Stalin, named Nikita Khrushchev, put on a big front, acted peaceful, talked about wanting to, make the world a more democratic place, and then lured Africa and Asia into thinking that the communists and capitalists could coexist. Khrushchev was a pretty evil person overall. He looked good on the, in face value, but he was terrible. A communist. He hated America and worked hard against America. Khrushchev and Eisenhower had the Geneva summit, and agreed to slow the nuclear arms race, which neither of us did. We kept building as many nukes as we possibly could, just made it secret. America was peppered with nuclear missile silos, most of which were built underground in the Midwest. In 1958, Khrushchev threatened to send troops into West Berlin, and Eisenhower said he'd defend. See, West Berlin was kept away from the Germans and kept free by American troops, while East Berlin had a wall around the entire city, the Berlin Wall, held by the Russians and kept in communist thrall. We had a new summit in 1960 because the Geneva summit obviously hadn't worked. And the U.S. had sent 2 U-2 spy planes over Russia and were shot down, and Khrushchev was so angry about this that he started a massive arms buildup. It was just getting ugly. The Cold War was a drain on our economy, and it hurt the psyche of the American people, and it was just a tough time, with paranoia about communism, and then communism actually being evil. But it wasn't just America versus Russia. In the Middle East, things were bad too. The president or prime minister or whatever of Egypt was named Nasser. He sponsored terrorist raids across the border into Israel, and seized the Suez Canal from British control. The Suez Canal is basically like the Panama Canal but over in the Middle East. It allows shipping in the Mediterranean, to save months of travel around Africa when going from east to west or west to east. Nasser seized the canal from the Brits in 1956. Israel troops ended up occupying the Sinai Peninsula, and the British and French were able to regain the canal, but boy, was it a mess. Russia threatened to aid Egypt in their efforts to seize the canal, and the United Nations had to send a massive peacekeeping force, and it almost erupted into a major war. And we've talked about the Monroe Doctrine and the Truman Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary. Well, now we have the Eisenhower Doctrine, which gave the president power to use force against communist aggression in the Middle East. Because if the communists were to take the Middle East when they already had footholds in Asia, Russia, and Africa, it could be major devastation for the world. especially because that's where all the oil was. They were forced to test this Eisenhower Doctrine and use force in Lebanon. The Cold War was a mess. But moving on, in 1956, Eisenhower instituted the Federal Highway Act, which strengthened and constructed the interstate highway system, which is awesome. We still use the interstate highway system today. We use it for a lot of our shipping. We use it for our travel. If we didn't have that interstate highway system, the infrastructure of America would be much different. It would be much harder to travel from place to place. It opened the St. Lawrence Seaway to America, which is in Canada and in New York area. And we also added Alaska and Hawaii as states in 1956. Can you believe that? It was as late as 1956 before Alaska and Hawaii came into the nation, into the Union. And also, the space age began during Eisenhower's era. The USSR launched the first manned space satellite into orbit in October 1957 and began the space race. I recommend you watch a movie called October Sky. It's a good quality, clean family movie. Stars Jake Gyllenhaal as a teenager. It's all about the space race and how America realized how far behind they were when Sputnik went into orbit, and how people became interested in building rockets and exploring space. The U.S. in 1958 launched Explorer 1 and began the NASA program, which basically started the space race for America, or kicked off that space race for America in earnest. See you tomorrow.